Okay. So again, welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about family and caregiver engagement. For those of you I've not had the pleasure of interacting with yet, my name is Lisa Sexton. I'm a director on the education team at BGCA, and family and caregiver engagement is a really important topic. It's always been important, but definitely I think we're seeing a little bit more of the need to provide these holistic resources and supports for youth, especially coming out of this pandemic. We're still being in the midst of it. So that's what we're going to focus on a little bit today. And again, I come at it with a lens from the education team, but you can certainly see from some of the things that we talk through and that we share, there's a lot of implications for family and caregiver engagement and all of these different aspects of programming. So I know that we have someone on the line who is a music coordinator. I know we have other people who do more, youth programming. So again, no matter where you're coming at this from, there is a way to have caregiver engagement support the work that you're doing. So here's going to be kind of our little roadmap for today. We'll first talk a little bit about back to school overview, because this is part of the back to school webinar series. So I'll give you just a little bit of feel for some of the other things that have been happening in that space. We'll do a community builder. It's a fun one, I promise. And then talk a little bit about kind of just caregiver engagement, what it is, go over some of the resources, and then kind of do a little bit of time at the end for some discussion of promising practices and challenges before we close out. So that is our roadmap for today. So let me make sure that I have all of my screens good. So a little bit about our back to school tools. So we have this season for back to school, we are moving from a threat of learning loss to the promise of youth-centered learning. So youth-centered learning is really where we're focused in, and it's one of the things that clubs do best. So the whole idea is about focusing on young people's strengths, needs, interests, identities, and building flexible learning opportunities and supports based on that. So there's a bunch of different tools that you'll see that can support you in this back to school season. And all of them are going to be, or a large majority of them are going to be available on the Program Basics Planner. And that's where you're going to find things like our new school partnership tools, our new family and caregiver engagement tools. That's also where you can book a one-on-one education consult to get some more individualized support. So I mentioned youth-centered learning. So what is that more specifically? So, and how does it connect to family and caregiver engagement? So youth-centered learning has 6 key components. And the very first one is all about leading with connection. Before we're able to support youth academically, we have to make sure that we're supporting them emotionally. So leading with connection is the first component of youth-centered learning. The second component that you'll see on the screen is a spectrum of enrichment and support. With the negative impacts of COVID, it's led a lot of people to really focus on remediation and trying to get youth to catch up. But we know that youth thrive when they're engaged in a variety of things, enrichment activities, and when they receive targeted academic support. So we want to make sure to provide both of those things. The third thing is responsive, culturally relevant, high-yield learning activities. So youth-centered learning, it's all about responding to the individual learner's strengths, needs, interests, and identities. That's why they are in the middle of this circle. So we want to provide opportunities that really resonate with who they are and where they are. The fourth piece, which was very particularly relevant for today, is our family engagement piece. So engaging families is a really critical component of a child's learning system because it helps to improve youth learning and outcomes, and it also strengthens the club community as a whole. The fifth one is about school partnerships. Clubs who engage with schools and develop impactful partnerships are able to more specifically respond to the strengths and needs of youth. When you connect with teachers, when you connect with school administrators, you get a more fuller picture of where youth are, what their needs are, what their strengths are, so that you can adapt your programming accordingly. And the last one is youth advocacy. When youth are engaged in youth-centered learning, then that means they get to focus on what matters to them. And this can often lead to opportunities for clubs to amplify youth voice and to support youth advocacy efforts. When youth are really excited about something, you pick up momentum and steam from that and give them a vehicle to express their passions and their ideas. So back to school season is an important time for staff training. So we've already had a lot of different webinars focused on a variety of different topics that can support you as you are getting into your fall programming. So we've had a webinar to highlight promising practices in STEMs from Club Blue Cross movement. We've shared ideas for how to integrate My Future programming into your education programming. We've also had trainings on exploring cultural relevant programming, and there's still more to come. So all of the webinars that are listed on the screen have already happened and they have been recorded. And so you can access them on .net. There's a brand new page under the training tab that allows you to search for on-demand webinars. So instead of having to figure out who led it, contact them, ask for the recording, you can just go there and you'll see under the education subsection that all of these are listed there. And there'll be more webinars to come. So if you are interested in more, you can check the events calendar on .net or select Leadership University by searching education and general virtual session. Specifically, I want to call out that in September, like mid-September, there's going to be a mini series on Power Hour. So if that's of interest, definitely check the calendar for those. Okay, so now let's get into more of this the topic on the agenda for today. And always like to start off with a community builder. It's one of our best practices that we try to exemplify as well. And I think this one will require a little bit of engagement and maybe some flashbacks to your childhood for some of you. So what we're going to do is play Guess That Family. I'm going to show a picture of a family on the screen, and I'm going to give you about 15 seconds to respond in the chat with who that family is. And bonus points if you can share what TV show they're from. Okay, so these are all TV show families. Guess That Family, try to figure out remember what their last name was, or the family name was, and then bonus points if you can figure out what TV show they're on. So here we go. This is your first picture. Depending on who's out there, this might be easy for some, and others might have absolutely no idea who these people are. Yes. Okay, so we have a couple of people at the very least. Even if you didn't see the show on TV, you're familiar with it. This is the Brady Bunch from the Brady Bunch show. Okay, the next one I have is slightly more recent. I think we're going in chronological order. What is this family? If you can figure out their last name, awesome. But if not, feel free to just type in the TV show. Yeah, I think we got it. So this is the Banks family, and they were on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. So this was, I think, Will Smith's breakout hit. Okay, we're going in a different direction with this next one. Let's see if anyone knows who this family is. Okay. Yes, it looks like we've got a few people who know this. I know them more from like a movie, but I think they also had a TV show. So this is the Addams Family. Don't even ask me what some of these characters' names are. I just know it's a unique family. Okay, next one. I will confess I don't think I watched this show, but maybe some of you did. Here we go. Any idea who these people are? Oh, and thanks for those people who clarified. Addams Family was a TV show in the 60s and a movie in the 90s. That's why. Wow, Ariel, you came in with both of the last names. Yes, extra bonus points to you. So this is a TV show. This is a TV show, Sister Sister, and this is the Landry Campbell family. They were twins that were separated at birth and then found each other. And the last one is the most recent one. So let's see if any of you have been watching TV in the past decade, 5 years, I don't know. Here we go. Here's your last one. Yes, it is. This is from the TV show Modern Family. The Pritchett's and the Dunphys, I believe, is the family name. They have different last names. Great. Well, thanks for playing along. Go ahead. There's actually no prizes for this game, so go ahead and get yourself a pat on the back if you got them right. Thanks for participating. And really, while this was kind of a very lighthearted introduction, really ultimately gets at a very important point when it comes to caregiver engagement, and that is that families are all unique. So you just saw a whole bunch of different families, and some of you may be more familiar with some than others, but I'm curious, from seeing those pictures, what are the ways that those families that you just saw are unique? How are they each kind of a little bit different from the others? What are some things about them that really stand out to you? And again, just a reminder, we had the Brady Bunch, Will Smith and the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Addams Family, Sister Sister, Modern Family. What are some of the ways that all of those families are unique? Yeah, they may have different lifestyles for sure. We have some that definitely have maybe a higher socioeconomic status than others, perhaps. Yeah, great point, Ariel. They're all blended in some way, and for those of you, we can elaborate a little bit more on that if you're not sure how or what that means exactly. The dynamics are all different, absolutely. Some of them have maybe more positive relationships. Some of them maybe have parent-friend relationships. Some of them, have their different dynamics. Oh, great. Interesting. I didn't know that. Brady Bunch was the first family of divorce. So I really want to just kind of go in a little bit more in detail about that blended aspect. Because when I say unique, they're unique in so many different ways, but one specific way that they're unique is the way that they're made up. So when we talk about the Brady Bunch, I actually had to do a little bit of research to figure this out. So Mike Brady was a widower. Carol Brady was divorced, and so their family came together after that. So they, had their kids with their previous spouses, and then kind of formed and bonded after that. When you think of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Will Smith was living with his very wealthy aunt and uncle because he was up to no good in the neighborhood of Philadelphia, I believe, as the song goes. So went to live with them. So a little bit different than, kind of a nuclear family. Honestly, I don't really know much about the Addams family. I just know they were a hodgepodge of a bunch of different characters. The Sister Sister show, as I mentioned, they were twins separated at birth that had been adopted. And so their parents, they were single parents, and they kind of found each other and got connected that way. And then Modern Family has a little bit of all of it. So from that, you can see that really no family is exactly the same. One, in just the makeup, and then two, of course, all of those different dynamics that you all were referencing can be completely different based on, culture, values, beliefs, other historical context. So that's something that we really have to keep in mind when we're working with families. And also, in light of that, the word that I'm going to use from here on out is the word caregiver. And that's because caregiver is a little bit more of an inclusive term because it can refer more broadly to all of the adult caregivers that are involved in a young person's life. They're oftentimes we think of families maybe in a more traditional sense, but really families can include biological parents, they can include adoptive foster parents, they might include grandparents, aunts, uncles, even adult siblings or trusted adults in the community. So the term caregiver is the one that I'm really going to lean into and use for the rest of this webinar, just for its inclusivity. So want you to take a moment to just reflect on the relationship that you have with the families and caregivers at your club. And here on the screen, you can see there's sort of a spectrum of engagement. Ideally, we want to sometimes move in one direction, but, things happen. Their situations arise where we might take a couple steps forward or back. So it's a continuous line. So what I'd like for you to do, if you can, at the top of your screen, there's a button that says annotate. And if you click on that, it allows you to draw, to make stamps on the screen. So what I'd like for you to do is annotate along this spectrum where you think you are. So you can put a stamp, circle, write something, and if you're not sure how to annotate, you can feel free to just type it in the chat. Where do you think that you are on this spectrum, or where's your club in terms of engaging with families and caregivers? And then just, again, in case anyone's on the line, I'll just say it out loud. So, one end at the left-hand side, it says we rarely interact with caregivers. The next space is caregivers are informed about programming and services. Then it's caregivers get input that is considered when we make decisions. And then the far right is caregivers are our partners and participate deeply in planning and decision making. So I'm just going to pause for maybe another 10 seconds and let you all annotate or type into the chat if you're not able to. Great. So it looks like we have a couple people that are sort of, it looks like maybe between rarely interacting and informing caregivers about programming services, some people that are a little between the next kind of two categories. And then from the chat, we see that some people mention kind of that they inform their caregivers. They're sort of in the middle of this line. So great, thanks for sharing. I am going to clear the screen of the annotations, but feel free to, if you haven't already, just type into the chat where you think you are. Okay. So something to keep in mind, especially as we kind of talk about this, to just really think about where you are, to take stock of that. And then as we go through this, thinking about where do you want to be and what do you need to do to get there. So we talk about caregiver engagement, and I think it's really important, though it sounds a little bit basic. It's kind of important to define that term because I think a lot of times we might think of very specific things of what caregiver engagement looks like, but when you actually understand the full term, it might be a little bit broader than you've been interpreting it to be. So caregiver engagement is including caregivers in activities, programs, planning, and decision-making. And I have a hunch that those final two, the planning and decision-making, are the ones that often get left off as we focus on maybe planning family nights or, family orientations. But, when you're really doing the full spectrum of it, it's all of those different pieces. So caregiver engagement is important because, so I have a few bullet points here, but what I want to see is just give you all a second to type into the chat, why do you think it's important at your club, or why is it important for the work that you do? We'd love to hear any of your thoughts. So if you want to type into the chat, again, you can also come off mute. We have a small enough group, and then I'll let you maybe share some thoughts before I share a few of my own. Why is caregiver engagement important for your club and for your role? Oh, I'm seeing some really great comments in the chat. So it helps them invest more deeply in their community. Absolutely. It engages them a little bit more. They bring their kids more often. Justine, you're absolutely right. There is research to show that when caregivers are engaged, their youth have improved participation. Were their children's home away from home? Absolutely. It directly benefits our members. It gives them more insight and allows them to help us impact the lives of the kids. I love that. Working together in partnership. we can meet their needs and have buy-in from them, absolutely. If they can feel valued and heard, learning from one another and supporting those families that can be struggling in different ways, absolutely. We know kids are better able to succeed in school when caregivers are invested in learning, absolutely. Also, research shows that there's improved student achievement when there is caregiver engagement, and you can probably think of a few different reasons why that might be the case. And yeah, Scout, that's a great point. Ultimately, we don't spend as many hours as they might spend with their whole family. We have them maybe in the afternoon, maybe in the summer for more time, but ultimately there's just a fraction of the time that they spend with us. So we can have all the positive impact we want, but if we're not in sync with their caregivers at home, then it's going to be hard for that impact to really take root. So a couple other more kind of general reasons of why it's important. It supports a young person's learning and development by better understanding their strengths, needs, and interests. Once you have that insight from the families, from the caregivers, you can respond in kind. It helps to reinforce consistent messaging across their different environments. So again, if they're only seeing you in the afternoon and you have certain policies or practices, it's helpful to have caregivers at home to be having those same messages to share that, so there's some consistency in their environments. And then also making sure that they have the information and resources to support their children. So a couple different reasons why it's important. And there's also research, as I kind of mentioned a few times, there's research that shows, I won't go into all of it because there's a lot, but research shows that caregiver engagement leads to improved student achievement, improved participation in after-school programs, and better outcomes for them. It also reduces rates of risky behavior, and there's a host of other things as well, but just a couple ones to specifically call out. So there's a couple core beliefs that we really need to embrace if we're going to be effective in doing this work. And that first one is all caregivers care about their children and want what's best for them. So in our roles, it can sometimes feel easy to be frustrated by the challenges that you face engaging with caregivers, because I will acknowledge it can be challenging. Maybe people are unresponsive to your communications. Maybe there's poor attendance at all the events you plan. And so sometimes it can be easy to get frustrated and to interpret that as evidence that they don't care. But the truth is, all families want what's best for their children, but they might confront some barriers that make it difficult for them to engage in the way that you want, and to support their children's learning and development in like a visible way. And a couple reasons why that might be, maybe they're reluctant because of past negative experiences with the education system, or even at the club, depending on maybe leadership or different staffing. Maybe they face barriers related to communication, transportation, childcare. And then also something I think we can all resonate with is they might just be overwhelmed by all that we have to do, by all that they have to do, juggling jobs, trying to keep bills paid. It's a lot of work. I know that I don't think I was prepared quite myself for adulting, so I completely understand. It's a lot. We want to be able to respond to them and their needs and be sensitive when we're designing those opportunities for engagement. So you want to recognize what some of those barriers are and try to provide ways for them to overcome those, whether it's through having a translator at the workshop, whether it's hosting an event and providing the transportation, or making it so it's in their community so they don't have to find transportation. Maybe it's providing, a meal so that they can participate and they don't have to go home and cook dinner. But keeping in mind that they want what's best for their children, but there may be some external factors that make that challenging. Another one is that they have the capacity to support their children's education. They might have a variety of educational backgrounds, but no matter what their background is, they can impact their child's academic success. A lot of times caregivers might lack this sense of self-efficacy, meaning that they might feel they might lack confidence about how they can support their child. Maybe it's because they struggled in school themselves, or they didn't learn that subject and they don't feel equipped to help their child, or maybe it's the subject is really advanced and so they're intimidated by that. But no matter what their background is, they have knowledge, skills, and experience that can really help and support their child's learning. So a couple examples, maybe they can teach their child how to cook, which actually allows them a chance to practice literacy skills if they're reading a recipe, math skills if they're working on fractions. They can engage their teens in discussions about different topics and current events, which engages them in critical thinking, or they could share their favorite childhood stories, which again also promotes literacy. So we want to recognize their knowledge and talents and then help find ways to empower them to leverage those for their children. So I'm going to pause from doing all the talking right now. And what I'd like to ask you is, what statements have you heard people make that don't align with these core beliefs? So again, those core beliefs of all caregivers want what's best for their children, and then all caregivers have the capacity to support their children's education. What statements have you heard people make that don't align with these core beliefs? And then we're going to try to flip them. What statements have you heard people make about caregiver engagement that doesn't match up with those core beliefs we just said about them caring and wanting what's best for their children, or having the capacity to support their child's education? Absolutely, yeah. Madison said our parents just don't care about how their kids are doing in school. Yeah, we may have heard that. They don't care. Yeah, I think from my time in after school programming, I think a lot of times the interpretation was, if they're not there, it's because they don't care. So that's one that I heard pretty commonly. So then if we hear those beliefs, how might we respond, or if we hear those statements, how might we respond in a way that aligns with those core beliefs? How might we respond in a way that reinforces that, no, actually caregivers do care and want what's best for their child, and they do have the capacity to support their child's education? How can we maybe help shift the narrative? What can we say in response to they just don't care? How might we respond? So if they say that caregivers just don't care about what's going on in school or about their child's behavior, how might we respond to that comment to help promote the idea that caregivers do care? Any ideas? Yeah, thanks for sharing, Melissa. I think, a key thing is just understanding what parents are facing. If we see that they, for example, don't attend an event, and so people think, well, that means they don't care. We have no idea what's going on in the background. We have no idea all the other conflicting commitments that they have, no idea what they're bringing to the table that might make it hard for them to participate. Ooh, I like that, Justine. If they didn't care, they wouldn't be at the club in the first place. That actually stopped me for a second. Yeah, if they didn't care, then they probably wouldn't have taken the time to enroll their kid in a program that's meant to provide, enriching supports. Different views on priorities. Parents have other things on their plate. Yeah, Lisa, perhaps their work schedule interferes with their involvement. Absolutely. So keep, if you do hear other staff maybe or other individuals make some of these comments, think about how might you respond to really help start to change that narrative, and make sure that we are really emphasizing that families, that caregivers, do have a lot of value, and we do want to embrace them as equal partners. So a couple key principles before diving into what does engagement look like, we have to have the key principles set. So I've got 5 key principles here that are going to serve as the foundation for all of the engagement that we do with caregivers. The first one is that we want to build relationships that are based on trust and respect. We want to, find opportunities to connect with them so that they feel seen, heard, valued. Open two-way communication. A lot of times we just douse families with a fire hose of information about all we're doing, but we have to make sure that we also pause and allow them opportunities to respond and share as well. And so maybe that looks like having an email address where they can send their inputs and ideas. Maybe that looks like surveys, but providing, instead of just, hosing them with information, how are we also receiving information from them as well? Collaborative, reciprocal partnership. So again, we don't want to emphasize this idea of a hierarchy that we know youth development, so we know best, but really we're all trying to work in partnership to ultimately support the child to make sure that they have the best outcomes. So how can we work together to maximize our impact? Cultural responsiveness. A lot of families come, we have to create engagements that are responsive to their background, to their culture, so that they feel seen, valued, heard, and appreciated, and ultimately and welcomed. And then intentionality is the last one, and that is pretty simply put that we want to make sure that we're being really thoughtful in the way that we're developing engagements. Instead of it being this last minute, hey, all of you caregivers, come to a thing tomorrow. We really want to make sure that we're thinking through what's going to be the best use of everyone's time, what's going to have the biggest impact, what's going to really resonate with caregivers and their needs and their interests. So keeping all of those things in mind. Once you have all of those things in mind, then you can start doing the real meat of it all, and that's the engaging activities. So kind of have it here split up into 5 different buckets of activities. And so I'm going to kind of just give you a little run through of what each bucket is, and then I would love, as I'm going through, for you to think about what are some of the ways that you're engaging with caregivers and how do they fall into this chart. And I will also share a PDF in the chat, or I'll email it to you afterwards in case I can't do that now. So there's 5 different categories of activities. There's information seeking. So that's opportunities for families to provide input about their needs and interests. And that would be things like focus groups, surveys, individual check-in meetings. Shared activities are opportunities for families to engage in experiences with their children. This is where I think probably a lot of you spend most of your time when it comes to family or caregiver engagement. That would be things like field trips, family nights, maybe special events like holiday showcases, etc. This could also include sending home packets of information for parents, even myself, I get tripped up on my words, for caregivers to do with their youth at home. Skill-based activities are opportunities for caregivers themselves to build knowledge and skills to support their child's learning and their own development. So I kind of break it into 2 different options. So one is caregiver workshops or trainings, and so that's where you might provide them with opportunities to kind of learn more about child development, about behavior management, so skills that are going to help them in their role as a caregiver. And then the second one is adult education classes, and those are opportunities that are going to support their own personal development, ultimately with the end goal of supporting their youth by serving as a role model and then being able to more effectively support their child. So adult education classes could be ESL classes, it could be financial literacy classes, GED, a whole bunch of different options there. Resource linking activities is opportunities for families to connect both with each other and relevant community services. When families connect with each other, that helps to build a social network of support. And when they connect with relevant community services, those can help them address their needs. Maybe if they're food insecure or they're housing insecure, it can help them address some of those needs. And then finally is leadership activities. And so those are opportunities for caregivers to build and exercise their leadership skills. Maybe that is by volunteering, maybe that's by serving on an advisory board, participating in an advocacy training. So lots of different options there as well. So I'm going to pause here and I'm going to see if I can put the PDF in the chat, and would love in the meantime if you can share what are some of the tangible ways that you are currently engaging with caregivers, and how do you want to grow your engagement? So where are you now? What are you doing on this chart already? And where is maybe an area that you would love to do a little bit more in? I'm going to give you some time to just think about that. Type your answers in the chat, and I'm going to try to share this PDF. So again, the question is, what are you already doing in kind of this chart of different activities, and where are some areas where you might want to do more? I'm slowly getting to the actual document. Okay. Okay, I think I just shared it. Thanks for sharing. So Ella mentioned they already have resources and family dinner nights, but want to be better about leadership opportunities. That's a great space to grow in. And I think that is definitely not the low-hanging fruit. Leadership opportunities definitely involve a little bit more planning and thoughtfulness, especially to be effective about it. Nobody wants to feel like they're part of an advisory group that's just rubber stamping everything that's already been decided. Ariel is just being onboarded. Welcome to the movement. Welcome to the family. Most of your involvement would be on family night. Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely I'd say a very common thing. And then also it's fun to plan those. Shared activities and resource linking is what Lisa mentioned. They'd like to do more with communication and skills-based activities. Awesome. Struggling due to COVID. Goodness gracious. I think you're definitely in a group that understands that. Before, though, you were talking about parent advisory boards. Absolutely. I think COVID kind of did both. It emphasized the importance of this and the need for this, but due to other things going on, at the same time just made it hard to prioritize this when there's so many other kind of emergencies sometimes that you have to address. Doing community days for holidays, back to school. Would love to do some more information seeking and resource linking. Awesome, thanks for sharing. Special events. Yeah, and certainly, of course, due to COVID, there are some challenges with doing caregiver engagement. And so I'll share with you in a little bit a resource, because, virtual engagement does look different in this space, but it is still possible, and it's still important. So that actually leads me right to it, which is our Family and Caregiver Engagement Guide. So as you can see on page 18 of this, Melissa, might be of interest to you. There's some recommendations for virtual engagement. Just because you can't necessarily have families or caregivers in the building does not mean you should stop this work completely, especially because we know how hard it is to build relationships. And so especially trusting ones have a solid foundation. So we want to keep this engagement going. And that looks different in this time. Maybe it means doing outdoor events. Maybe it means doing more individual phone calls home. Maybe it means hosting some kind of Zoom activities, doing more Facebook posts, what have you. Lots of ways to do it, but still would encourage you to focus on it and to keep it going so that you don't have to build those relationships all over from scratch. But again, lots of this guide really goes into more detail about the principles that I just shared with you, about those core beliefs, some of the research behind all of this, and then kind of give some more promising practices from different clubs that have done engagement activities. And then one thing that's super actionable is that there's also tools and templates included. So there's a family orientation template, there's a family night satisfaction survey template, a lot of other things that'll be really helpful for you to just pick up and go. And you can access that in 2 different locations, depending which may be helpful, especially if you don't yet have a .NET login or you've just always had challenges getting logged into that site. It's on .NET. It's under Project Learn. That's where you'll find all of our guides, our supports and resources for family and caregiver engagement, and also school partnerships, another area we've been doing a lot of work in recently. And you can also find it, again, this does not require a login, so it might be a little bit easier on the Program Basics Planner. If you go to Family and Caregiver Engagement, there's no difference between the 2, just simply a different location. So I'm actually going to drop both into the chat just so you have those. I know you can't really click on this screen itself. So first one is on .NET. The second one is going to be open source. And we also have some Project Learn small little mini trainings. I think all of them are maybe like 15 minutes or less. So there is one specific to family and community involvement. So you might want to check that out. I'm trying not to overwhelm you with links, but I will put this one in here. So again, if you want to kind of dive in a little bit more, maybe you're a visual person, so this might be easier for you to do. And family and caregiver engagement is also really integrated into a lot of our other resources more and more every day, especially as we realize how important caregiver engagement is, not just to academic success, but also to emotional wellness, trauma-informed care, and even social justice. So there is a family engagement toolkit, which is sort of a supplement. There's just some more tools in there that you can access, and it very clearly aligns it to trauma-informed care. So if that's something that your organization is really focused on, that might be another one to look at. And then there's some resources on the behavior support toolkit, and those are going to be a little bit more focused on behavior and how to support that. And I will, again, at the risk of potentially overwhelming you with links, I'm going to link both of those in there, and then I think it will stop so that you don't get too overwhelmed with all of it. And then, like I mentioned, it's already integrated into some of our resources, but hoping to continue to build this out. It is a part of Project Learn. So Project Learn is our strategy for academic success. So you'll see a whole section in that book about engaging with caregivers. Power Hour also includes some resources related to caregiver engagement specific to academics. There's some parent tips for summer learning. I think there's some other kind of caregiver support for academics and homework help. So something to look at if that's of interest to you. And then Smart Moves, which is one of our, which falls in the health and wellness category, that program includes some discussion guides for families and caregivers. It includes extension activities and some helpful templates for hosting family nights. So some more resources there. And then finally, the last one, before we have a moment to sort of do some discussion and debrief, there is, during COVID, we developed an emotional wellness resources for parents and caregivers. So that's something that might directly support caregivers. And so you can access that on our programs page on .NET. Just a lot of resources, and also in different languages too. They're all external resources though. So now that I have shared with you all of the resources, let's kind of have a moment to just hear from you all. Some of you, again, you're all at different stages of your caregiver engagement journey. But for those of you who maybe have done more in this space, what are some of the things that have worked well for you when it comes to caregiver engagement? And maybe what's something that you've learned about engaging with caregivers? I know we have a few people on the line that are specifically, their role is caregiver engagement or family coordinator or something. So I would love to hear if you all wouldn't mind sharing anything that's worked well, any lessons that you've learned that you could share with us. Oh, I love that. Justine, my first line of defense is 1 or 2 minute check-ins at pick up and drop off. That is a fantastic point. One of the promising practices that was shared with me by BGC of Portland, I think it was, is oftentimes, you have these interactions every day with caregivers, and it can be very easy for it to just become a transaction. Just here's your child, here's your lunch, here's papers. How can you turn that moment into an opportunity to connect? Ask them how they're doing. Ask them what's going on at home. It's short, but anything that can show that you see them as a person can be really, really powerful. I love that. Justine, if you have any tips of, how to, especially as we know you're all probably trying to run, what are some tips that you have, maybe good questions to ask, or any tips you have for keeping that personal while also keeping things going? Madison mentioned award ceremonies with food provided. Absolutely. Everyone loves food. Definitely a promising practice is providing food. I mean, it's that's one way to overcome some barriers and also just creates a warm atmosphere. And then something that's an award ceremony that makes them feel excited about something their kids accomplished, or just as a way for you to kind of highlight some of the wonderful things about their children that makes everyone feel warm and fuzzy inside. Compliment. Oh, I thought you said complimentary sandwiches. Compliment sandwiches. Okay, that makes a little bit more sense. So, Chesty, feel free to elaborate. But I'm thinking that for those who aren't aware, compliment sandwiches is sort of where you maybe you have something that you do actually want to address that's maybe about a challenging behavior, but you want to kind of start with a compliment, then address it, then kind of lead next with maybe what you want to discuss, and then kind of end with a compliment. So it just is a more positive approach to that conversation, because difficult conversations are hard. Include food, have the club members participate in programming. Yeah, when the kids have a chance to maybe design the activity, then they're probably going to be more insistent that their caregivers come, and then that's just cool to see them excited about that as well. Ooh, Melissa mentioned they started with a garden club. I'm curious. I can think of a lot of ways of how that could support caregiver engagement, but would love if you have any more details to share. I know when I did that in Baltimore, we worked with a garden in the community. So they could go on the weekend and do gardening. They could collect some of the produce that grew. But I'm not sure, maybe Melissa, if you have other thoughts of how that went at your club. Oh, thanks for sharing, Justine, that example. Kid was great today. Here's a concern, but we're excited to see them tomorrow when it'll be a better day. How are you? Can work wonders. Sometimes they just need someone to listen to. Vicki, that's a great point. We all do. I love that. Sharice, follow up on conversations. If a parent or if a caregiver shares something with you about something that's going on, whether it's with themselves, whether something in their family, it's so powerful if you then check in later about how did that thing go. That helps them feel seen. Yeah, always making sure that they know the positives about their kid as well, because nobody likes to get all those negative phone calls. And so now that we have all those promising practices, I know that it's not all roses and sunshine all the time. So want to create some space if there's any challenges. What are some barriers that you've encountered? What questions do you still have? And maybe we can do a little bit of brainstorming with the group, or maybe at the very least you can just feel validated knowing that you're not the only one that's struggling with some of these things. What are some barriers or challenges that you've encountered? It sounds like this group already has, or if you haven't started, I know some of you mentioned that you're newer. Maybe what are some of the barriers or challenges that you're worried about encountering, or that you think you anticipate encountering? Mm. Yeah, Allie, sometimes people aren't as social. Definitely, when you're feeling some resistance, you're asking, "How are you?" And trying to kind of probe, and you're just not feeling like it's resonating. That can be very demoralizing. You think like, "I'm really trying here. Like, what's going on?" Having no face-to-face interactions. Oh, absolutely. When things are just on the phone or when it's just on Zoom, it can be really hard to figure out like what's actually going on. How do they really feel? It's harder to connect that way. Yeah, having if your families or if your caregivers speak different languages, while you may know that it'd be helpful to provide a translator, actually accessing that is another thing entirely. But one great possibility, and of course, would love if anyone's able to like kind of respond and give each other some tips in the chat, please do. One great thought for the translation piece is if there's parents that can provide that or there are caregivers that can provide that, and maybe they can volunteer. So, so having them feel a little bit empowered if they are bilingual, perhaps. Yeah, biggest issue we've had with summer camps is that many sign up, but a lot cancel at the last minute. Um, would love. Does anyone have any suggestions or any thoughts about that? Especially, I know that attendance is probably a challenge and a variety for a lot of people. What have you done to sort of address that? Um, do you follow up more? Do you have them, pay some amount? What do you do to address some of that attendance issue? Mm, that's great. So it looks like some people who have had maybe challenges with attendance, a couple things that they've done, deposits. So one thing, depending on how you want to do it, you could, have them pay a certain amount for a workshop. You can always get that amount back if they do show up. That you certainly would know your community better, whether that might be successful or not. Mandatory orientation, so at least you have one opportunity to really connect with them and go over everything. Providing incentives, so you know, like we said, food. Food might be helpful, or maybe even if they come to something, saying that'll count towards you know a, a discount for future classes or future programming, however you want to do it. But yeah, these are certainly some super valid challenges. And so maybe one opportunity, certainly there's some suggestions in the chat, but another opportunity, I'm going to go ahead and share in the chat. We currently are soliciting applications for a family and caregiver engagement grant. So I'm going to give you just a short overview. We're providing $11,000 to clubs that are interested in strengthening their caregiver engagement, and they will do that in two ways. One is by conducting an online assessment of caregiver needs and interests. So, online meeting should be accessible to caregivers even if they're not actually, able to attend in person. You can send it out that way, and then using that information to then inform programming, to inform some sort of engagement activity. So I've shared this on a couple different places yet. We'll ultimately be accepting 25 clubs for this. You don't have to have any experience doing caregiver engagement. This is honestly an opportunity for everyone to learn together. So if it's something of interest to you, definitely encourage you to check out the application. If you have any questions, feel free to email me about them. My information is also on the grant application as well. So would love for us to work together as we continue to figure out what are some ways that we can overcome some of those challenges, and how can we continue to collect some promising practices. So with all that, we've got a couple more minutes. If you have any questions, would love to hear them. If you have any final, wait, everyone needs to know about this great thing that works wonders, please type it into the chat. But thank you all so much for joining. Really enjoyed hearing your thoughts. And maybe to close, if you have one thing that you want to do, one action item that you're going to do as a result of this webinar, would love if you could share that as well. Maybe something you're going to take away or something you're going to do based on this. Oh, I like that. You know, it seems so simple, putting effort into just saying, how are you? It's simple, but we know we don't need to overcomplicate it. Looking at virtual engagements, yeah, and definitely Justine, if you have some ideas, please, again, everyone send them my way. We are all still on this learning journey together. We don't have it all figured out. Lots of challenges, but lots of promising practices too. Absolutely. Try to check in with caregivers. Yeah, maybe that's a good takeaway from this. Everyone try to say, how are you? Try to check in with a caregiver today, whether a phone call, whether it pick up, you know, go forth and connect with caregivers. And thank you all so much for joining. I'll still hang on here a little bit, but feel free to hop off and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you all for joining. Appreciate your time.